Welcome in to the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater, alongside Richard A. the Cruz, who is not here today, and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Good evening.
It is Monday, June 16th, 2025. Go to our YouTube channel. Let's just start the whole thing over.
Our YouTube channel.
Thank you. YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. You can support us for $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits. Early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more. This was a big news week. SAG-AFTRA has suspended its strike. We have Jason Schreier doing a write-up on Dragon Age Veilguard, an update on some Ubisoft stuff that I think we'll end the show with because it's not fun to talk about. So we have a lot to discuss news-wise. I have some things I would like to talk to you about when it comes to video games-wise.
Oh.
But what games have you been playing? Let's start
Not
with that.
a lot.
Okay.
So we played Phasmophobia over the weekend.
We did. Yeah, that was a good time.
The other game I played was the demo for Void War, which is FTL, but like 40K. It is
Okay.
extremely themed and like designed to look like 40K,
Okay.
but it isn't officially 40K.
Gotcha.
But it's FTL with some like obviously some changes. You're not like outrunning rebels or anything like that. It's just more of a standard roguelike where you're just going. It's FTL. It's fun. The enemies start off a little bit tougher. If you remember FTL, like the first few enemies you face have like one shield.
Okay. I don't remember FTL very much. All I remember is that the only way I would take out bad guys is by just vacuuming the entire ship.
Which you can still do.
I would vacuum the ship, and that would take out the fires and the bad guys, and that was my only real strategy on how to deal with anything. So yeah, but you can still do it in Void War,
Yep.
huh? Okay, good. My strategy continues.
But the enemies start a little bit tougher. They have more shields. They typically have comparable weapons to yours, so it's a bit tougher than the start of FTL. At least the demo is. But other than that, I've just been painting minis.
Painting minis?
Yeah.
Nice. Getting back into that mini life.
Mm-hmm.
Fun. I do miss painting minis, and I miss playing tabletop games. But so I
We'll have to have a mini painting day where we just put on like the next generation and just paint all day.
We have done that before.
Yes, we have.
Good times. I think that was the last time I watched an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. I don't know why I put on Enterprise. Maybe it's trying to jump around.
I think I had us put it on as a joke.
Oh, okay. Space Dad.
Yeah.
Travis, you're gonna start noticing women. Sorry. So I've been playing Expedition 33, and I hopped back into Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and both of these games are like, I think, the best games that I've played this year. As I think as far as quality or how much fun I'm having, Expedition 33 continues to get better and better. Its themes of it, the way its characters are written, the way its world is written. I'm really appreciating how it handles the emotion of it all. How its characters are, I think, emotionally intelligent, and it seems to want you. It wants its characters to get along and understand one another, but also have maybe little frictions here and there. And I really enjoy that. I don't know if it is a reference to Heart of Darkness. I don't think so, but it is very similar to Heart of Darkness in the sense that you're on a mission to take out a person who is doing something bad, and it's like a journey that you go on, and as you go, I don't know if things get crazier and crazier, but yeah, I think so. Like, in a way, the very beginning of the game is this big, like, intense battle where a bunch of stuff happens. And then from there, it's like you meet people, and your perception of like the world and what has happened, and the state of the world, why why they live on an island that's separated from France somehow, all that stuff gets explained, and the world becomes much bigger than just there's a paintress out there that's killing everybody. Like, there's a whole bunch more going on that's interesting. But it does, I don't know. I guess maybe what I'm getting at with the Heart of Darkness reference is that it is like a loss of innocence. One of the characters is a teenager, Mael. She's a teenager and she decides to go on the expedition because she just doesn't see the point in waiting for her own expedition. In her mind, she's like, I might as well just do it now. So she's young and I think she has trouble handling some of the things that she sees, and the rest of the team kind of has to be there for her. So there is like a loss of innocence in going out to fight the paintress. I think it's interesting. I mentioned this to you just a couple minutes ago, how it's clear that I think a lot of the art design is like Art Deco. It's very Belle Epoque, right? And I'm not a history expert, but as far as I know, the Belle Epoque was an optimistic era, maybe not in every place on Earth, but I think if you're talking Europe, United States, the progressive era, I think was more optimistic than it was pessimistic. So it's interesting to see that contrast, because Expedition 33 is not optimistic, right? And I've talked about this. Gustav, his line is, "For those who come after," right? So this idea is that they already expect to die. They expect to fail. And on your way to the paintress, there's failure everywhere. You see bodies of former expedition. You pick up journals of previous expeditions, and you hear where previous expeditions went wrong and what happened. And it's all just failure and death, and people sort of coming to terms with the fact that that their life is going to be ending in here somewhere. And so that I don't know, that I think is interesting, that juxtaposition where you have all this art that comes from an era that was like supposedly optimistic, but it's a very pessimistic game, and characters that are staring down the barrel of inevitability. Also, there are like sculptures in the game that remind me a lot of Picasso sculptures and stuff like that. I remember I saw a Picasso sculpture once that was, the way it was explained was that Picasso's idea apparently was that you were trying to imagine a shape inside out. So that's what the sculpture was. The sculpture was a shape, but instead of just sculpting that shape, it was the shape inside out. Okay. And, you can discuss whether or not, whatever. But there are sculptures that I feel like are kind of like that, where it's like they have like a rigidity to them and like a flimsiness to them that is somewhat surreal, and they feel sort of fragile, and they're all very expressive. They look like, some of them look like they are in pain and stuff like that. And I think that's all, I don't know. If I knew more about sculpture and I could better point out like references to what these sculptures may be emulating or taking reference from, I think that could make an interesting like read of the text, but I'm not an expert in any of that. So yeah, all positive on Expedition 33. The combat continues to get better and better. I found another character, and all the characters have widely different skill sets, and figuring out how to generate different synergies between them is a lot of fun. And the combat can also get really difficult, just because some of the combat is just this boss has a one-hit kill, and if you dodge it, and if you don't, you die. There's no other way around it. So there was a boss I was fighting that all the boss's attacks were almost one-hit kills for my party at the time. And so I basically had to figure out the timing on how to dodge and parry their attacks, right? But as soon as I got that pattern down, I was golden. In fact, I beat the boss without taking a single hit, because that was the only way I could survive, or nearly survive. So it's like, with some bosses, it comes down to learning the pattern, when to dodge, when to block. There's also jumping that you do that I forget, but some enemies do an attack where you have to jump off the ground, and if you get that, you actually get an attack in. So it's like some bosses will have like a parry, jump, parry, and you just kind of have to memorize that attack. And that, of course, is true for all enemies, but for bosses, it's more so, because bosses will just knock you out in a couple hits or whatever. And then, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I have wanted to hop back in, but it's kind of intimidating, because it's this big historical simulator. where you have to eat and maintain your clothes and armor and feed your puppy and you know, wash all your clothes and wash Henry himself, and you can't go out at night because it's pitch black, so you have to sleep. And if you do go out at night, you got to figure out a way where you can see, so you have to, you know, so it's very it's a meaty, very crunchy simulator with a ton of things that you have to think about. And I still do not have a horse. And I think this is my fault, because there's a quest where a guy's like, hey, no, go get a horse before we go, and I forgot to do that. So I'm like without a horse, and I need to just go get a horse. So I think as I play more, what I'm going to focus on is I have a chest of like old stuff that I took off bandits when I fought bandits and killed them. So I think I'm just going to take those things around and sell them, and then eventually buy a horse. Now the problem with that is, because Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is so real, quote unquote realistic or whatever, grounded, there are towns where there is a blacksmith, but a blacksmith is not in every town. Yeah. There's a town where there is a butcher, but a butcher is not in every town. So a blacksmith will buy armor and weapons from you, but they're not going to buy shoes, because shoes aren't armor. So you have to go to a cobbler or maybe a general store where they will buy the shoes. Same thing with fixing things. A blacksmith will fix your weapons and armor. Blacksmith doesn't know how to hem a coat, so you got to go find a tailor that actually can hem, and then everything that has to do with tailoring, that's where you take them. So you have to go to a whole new town for that. So what I have to do is I have to organize all this stuff that I have just taken off of dead bandits, go to the right towns, sell all that, and then use that to buy a horse. And then finally I'll have to feed the horse, I'm sure. And then I'll be able to get around the game much easier.
Make a few expeditions. And finally, once you get on your 33rd expedition.
Yes. Kill the paintress.
Yes.
And I was explaining to you before the show, like, I think, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, partially because of that, where only certain towns have certain things. I don't know of too many games that capture like living in history as much as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does. Red Dead Redemption is one that comes to mind, but even Red Dead Redemption can get kind of actiony and stuff like that, which maybe KCD2 can as well. But like, every town has really, really the people of the town, they wake up in the morning, they go do really specific jobs. Yeah. There are parts of the town that I feel like are historical recreations. Like there's an outhouse, and there's a big pile of rotten apples and other stuff and flies. And it's like, so that's like the town's dung pile or something. It's like, I don't know how they disposed of all that stuff, but it made me curious. It's like, did they just have like an area of the town where they just dumped trash, and then eventually they buried it once it reached some kind of like maximum storage or something? I don't know. Maximum capacity? I don't know. There's people who, carpenters, and they're out cutting wood and, cutting logs in half and stuff like that. So it's all just very, and it's all very like, structured and scheduled, and that gives the world a real strong sense of reality. And obviously, I like the sound design is really good. You can hear everything on Henry, his chainmail, armor. You feel, I don't know, just the way Henry moves and the sound design, it really does a good job of making you feel like you're somebody moving around with armor. It does a really good job of that. So that is interesting, just because it is a simulator. It's incredibly immersive, and that makes me interested about how accurate is this. What are the things that are super accurate, and what are the things that are bent a bit so that gameplay is better or whatever. And it keeps me wanting to like Google things ferociously to see the details. But I'm going to play more of that. I need to get a horse. I just need to get a horse. Please, God, I need to buy a horse.
My country for a horse.
Yes. Okay. With that, we can do the ad. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. SAG-AFTRA has suspended its strike. SAG-AFTRA's National Board approved a tentative agreement on the Interactive Media Agreement. If ratified, the agreement provides compounded interest and performer compensation at a rate of 15% with an increase of 3% in November of 2025, 26, and 27. On AI, I'm just going to read straight from the SAG-AFTRA press release. The new contract accomplishes important guardrails and gains around AI, including the requirement of informed consent across AI, various AI uses, and the ability for performers to suspend informed consent for digital replica use during a strike. Compensation gains include the establishment of collectively bargained minimums for the use of digital replicas created with IMA-covered performances and higher minimums for real-time generation, i.e., embedding a digital replica voice chatbot in a video game. Secondary performance payments will also ensure compensation when visual performances are reused in another video game. It's a 3-year deal, and the full terms will release June 18th, which we're recording this Wednesday night, so that is on Wednesday.
We're recording this Monday night. That's
Monday night, yeah. Monday night, and June 18th is Wednesday. SAG-AFTRA members will have until 5 p.m. on July 9th to cast their vote on ratification. Did you have any? We've kind of followed the story for a while, and a couple months ago, it seemed like they were at an impasse, and companies didn't want to. They seem like they loved AI or something. I don't know. Ashley Birch posted a video on TikTok and discussing her anxiety about the whole situation. Any high level takes real quick?
I do think ultimately, by and large, any movement forward on SAG-AFTRA members gaining control over generated AI usage is a good step.
Yeah.
I really like the ability for performers to suspend informed consent for digital replicas during strikes.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, I'm curious how that would work if your digital replica is out there. Do you know every time it's used? I would assume if there's consent involved, so it's not like somebody can just use it in a game. I assume you have to get your okay to use it in a game or something like that. At least I hope that's how it would work. I don't remember if it mentioned it. The details are going to, again, are released on Wednesday, so we don't know fully how everything's going to shake out. I'm curious. One thing I'm interested in is how this impacts the AI industry. Well, not the AI industry. What I'm trying to say is I haven't thought about it like this, but I am curious how collective bargaining like this stymies AI's sort of encroachment into art, right? And when I say AI, I mean generative AI. Not obviously, AI is an umbrella term, but I don't know. Companies clearly like the idea of generative AI. The cynical, and maybe not cynical, maybe just practical part of me says it's because they don't have to pay people.
Yeah.
It's an easy way to generate something that they can, slap on to a box somewhere or whatever. So it's
payroll is the biggest part of any company, and they like to get that number down.
Yeah. So if you can cut away at that number, I don't know. And I don't think that's a cynical take.
No.
So if you are a company that is looking into generative AI and you have to constantly fight for its use and with the people that work for you, and labor is on the side of trying to curtail generative AI's power, then does that at all sort of curtail the market for generative AI, right? Because that's one thing that it feels like what is the use case for generative AI? You can make action figures of yourself. Oh my God, right? There's little funny things, but it, as far as it being a product, you can search the internet with it. But I mean, if Google made Google better and not actively worse, would you need? I don't know. Would it be any better than just a good search engine? You can, and then there's the big ones, like you can create images with it, or you can generate voices with it. But at that point, you're just replacing people that can already do those things. So it's like if people are involved in the sense that they own their work and it can't be put into an LLM somewhere or whatever, into some kind of database where a generative AI can build on top of it, and you have your consent in that, doesn't that not hurt the generative AI industry? And we have heard this, right? There was that guy for Meta who, and I think we've seen this multiple times now. What was it? Discovery and Disney, was it sued? Not OpenAI, but they sued. It was the famous image generator.
Midjourney, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was Midjourney. And as part of the lawsuit, somewhere in there, they found that basically Midjourney said somewhere that if they were to inform everybody every time their image was used, it'd be like impossible because we're just taking so much shit from the internet. There'd be no way, right? So if that's the case, and if you have a collective bargaining agreement where it's like, okay, you have your consent now, does that not curtail the industry at all? I don't know. I think that's interesting. Sorry, did you?
To tack on to your point about having possibly a cynical take, it is 100% not a cynical take, because the approach of it was always, this won't be here to replace jobs, and then that is exactly what they've been trying to use it for.
Well, yeah, that's true. And there was that story in Aftermath just a couple of weeks ago about like how generative AI isn't replacing people, but it's like companies are trying to jam it into the workflow in a way that doesn't make sense, or the way that's not helpful. And so it's like, I don't know, maybe somehow later, part of collective bargaining agreements can be, you don't have to use generative AI. I don't know if that would be legally possible or whatever, but like trying to collectively bargain the tools that you can use when you're doing your work. Don't know, just spitballing there. The other thing I'm curious about is how this impacts user-generated content. AR Darth Vader, as horrible as it was, I think it was a success, or it seemed like it was a success, because, oh my God, I made Darth Vader say a swear word. It's the funniest thing ever. So it's like, okay, congratulations, you made something stupid. And that's clear. And with UGC being like the next big trend that I feel like the industry wants to get into, and generative AI being a part of that, because if you have a bunch of people doing work for you for free, what better tool to give them than something that just generates a bunch of other stuff? If all of a sudden there's collective bargaining in there that hurts generative AI, how does that hurt the UGC scene? Now, honestly, I don't think all that much, just because.
Well, I think UGC is really popping off, especially with Mind's Eye.
Okay, so
with its mostly negative rating on Steam.
There's a part of me that feels bad, because every game that is made by people. So there are people that are having a bad time.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like, why were certain decisions made in the first place? And why do we have to make those decisions? I don't know. So, because we've read that interview last week by Benzies with what Mind's Eye, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I don't remember, what Mind's Eye was going to be. And it was just this huge nebulous UGC buzzword salad, just. And I don't
100% for investors to like get interested with like the talk, the jargon, and be like, ooh, this is where my money gets tingly.
And that stuff bothers me, because it's like, you're not, I don't know, it doesn't feel like you're not trying to, it doesn't come across like you're just trying to make games. It comes across like you're just trend chasing and saying things to, I don't know, to get to, because you want to become the next Roblox or something. But I just don't think that's a goal worth aiming for. But as far as UGC goes, the point I wanted to make for you, just hold your thought. The point I wanted to make for UGC is just, if there are more guardrails around AI and actors being able to control their performances and their content and stuff like that, then how does that affect the UGC trend chase. We have yet to see, but I think it's going to have some sort of impact. You had a thought?
It was tangential, just related to Mind's Eye. If you wanted to touch on anything else first.
No, go ahead.
I will say one good thing that has come out of Mind's Eye, some of like the content that I've seen come out of it. I'm less worried about, a singularity event because all the AI like controlled cars were just driving off of cliffs. So
I did not see
that. AI is having its own existential moment and it's decided to take the easy route.
It's seeing the world and it's like, nah, I'm good. I'm out. I'm gonna head out.
User-generated content? No, thank you.
They're taking the SpongeBob. I'm gonna head out of here. Okay. All right, we'll move on here. There was this piece by Jason Schreier and Bloomberg inside the Dragon Age debacle. There is a lot here. I think we'll link it in the description. I'm just going to give a few key points and then read a little bit. But I'm not going to be able to summarize the entire story because it's not super long, but there's a lot of like details in it. But just a few key points here. So the decision to make Dragon Age a live service, the Dragon Age after Dragon Age Inquisition, a live service game came from up high. EA executives were frothing for live service money. So there's a story in the story about Mike Laidlaw getting some staff at BioWare in a conference room, pulling out whiskey and saying they want it to be a live service game. I'm resigning from the company. And then they drank away the night because everything was about to change, which is just I don't know. That just sucks. But the live service Dragon Age never took shape, and BioWare pivoted back to a single-player project, but the studio had to remake the game's structure and rewrite the story on the fly. So rather than being able to go into pre-production or something like that, they had to retool things on the fly. And of course, when you reboot a game twice and then a third time, there's budgetary considerations. You're burning cash as this game is stuck in development hell. So all that is not great. And then in 2023, members of the Mass Effect team were brought in to help finish Dragon Age. It's relatively well known that the Mass Effect and BioWare teams, Mass Effect and Dragon Age teams historically operate differently and have shared a certain tension in that. And I'm going to read a little bit more about this directly from the story. Quote, as the Mass Effect directors took control, they scoffed that the Dragon Age squad had been doing a shoddy job and began excluding their leaders from pivotal meetings, according to people familiar with the internal friction. Over time, the Mass Effect team went on to overhaul parts of the game and design a number of additional scenes, including a rich, emotional finale that players loved. But even changes that appeared to improve the game stoked the simmering rancor inside BioWare, infuriating Dragon Age leaders who had been told they didn't have the budget for such big, ambitious swings. And that's something that David Gator, who's one of the lead writers on Dragon Age, has talked about. I think that's something that I think that's basically something a lot of people have talked about, where Dragon Age, like EA already doesn't know how to manage BioWare, and they really don't know how to manage Dragon Age, like as a subset of BioWare. But yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts, including on how the story ends. But I'll give you the floor.
EA's approach and handling of BioWare over the past decade and a half is Moss staring at the fire extinguisher on fire.
I'll support that. Yes. Yeah.
It's this. They just want profitable games, but they don't want the companies that make profitable games to make the games that they know will be profitable. They want the trend chasing profit rather than let the company that is renowned for making these RPGs make these renowned RPGs and get loads of money from it.
Yeah.
But it's not the boatloads of money that they could possibly maybe get if they make a live service game.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the major thing to like understand about Electronic Arts and its relationship to BioWare is BioWare will never make a game that is as profitable as FIFA.
Correct.
Or EAFC, right? But that is the nature of what BioWare does. Like, BioWare's market cannot surpass football's market.
Yeah.
Because football is a global sport that is a hobby for quite literally, I'm sure, billions of people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if there is if there's anything, the largest hobby on earth, I don't know, it might be watching soccer. Like, honestly, that or cricket, right? Like, honestly, across the entire world, the most popular thing to do, if people wrote down how do you spend your afternoon, it's got to be up there, watching soccer. So no matter how good of a game BioWare made, it would never surpass that sort of popularity, because it's not in the nature of the medium to do that sort of thing, right? So there is that. And I don't know, I'm sure EA understands that. They just don't give a shit because they just want to make money. Why can't you just make money? Why can't you just do live service? Why can't you just shut up about dragons and make more money?
Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun.
Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun and kick goal and sell loot box. Like, why can't you do that?
I think, though, one benefit that like BioWare's method does have over like FIFA, like development wise, is FIFA is always an ongoing money sink. Like, they're always developing the next FIFA, the next FIFA, the next FIFA. And so they always have to lean into microtransactions and macrotransactions, to be honest, to cover that budget. Whereas BioWare makes a game, sells it, and then it gets small bumps over time, but those small bumps come at no additional cost for development, or virtually.
I mean, I don't know how DLCs are budgeted. If I assume maybe that when you decide on the scope of a project, like I assume, you know what? I don't even know. Well, sorry, I just had a whole conversation with myself. so I assume when you sit down to budget a project, you say, well, what kind of DLCs
let's just
are we
imagine that they're just making the base game.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is I assume when you sit down, you decide what kind of DLCs are we going to have, and then you schedule and plan that out, right?
Yeah.
Because we have seen, like with Veilguard or like with Cyberpunk 2077, where I think Cyberpunk was supposed to have 2 expansions at one point and ended up only being 1. So clearly they had plans. Reality hits you hard, bro. And then, okay, you only have Phantom Liberty, right? And it's the same thing with Veilguard, where Veilguard's story definitely seems like it left room for a sequel, if not DLC. And then it's not going to get anything. So again, it's like you make these plans. But again, with Veilguard, the development was so insane that, like, who knows what lines are supposed to mean.
I can kind of speak to this working on QA side, where we've been told periodically, hey, we're doing this. Hey, we're not doing that anymore. Budget change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is a constant ebb and flow when you're doing long-term cycles of this changing budget to where it's needed most, or these things aren't getting, like, this thing isn't, going exactly the way we want it to, but it's good enough, so we're going to start to lower the budget on that just to get it out the door while we focus more towards this. That does happen. But with Dragon Age or Mass Effect, they make it, and then the initial buy happens, and then holiday sale buy happens, and then the next holiday sale buy happens. And you'll get to a point where I've recommended coworkers just to pick up the Legendary Edition because they're interested in it, but they're like, I don't know if I want to, go through everything. I'm gonna just get the Legendary Edition on your PlayStation or your Xbox. Just do that, play the game. They're fantastic. Forget what people said about it in 2012. It's actually a good story.
Well, yeah, because I think at that point, once you're that, because games tails go down, right? The whole thing with live service is to pull that tail back up somehow, right? And that, in a lot of ways, has destroyed video games. Yeah. But it's like with single player games, that tail goes down. So what you can do is 3 years down the road, you can package all the DLC into a Game of the Year edition. Yeah. And then someone who is thinking about spending maybe $50 on a game that came out that was $60. The Game of the Year edition, oh my god, it's $60, but it includes all the DLC.
What a deal.
What a deal, which is better than me buying a normal copy and then having, like, so that's a better deal. That incentivizes you. That's a better, like, everybody gets the economics of that. So that's one way to pull up the, but you have to have DLCs planned for that to happen. But on Dragon Age 4, so I think one of the things I would love to know is who made the decision for it to be live service? Like, because according to Mike Laidlaw, that was from On Up High. So who made that decision? Because they made a very bad decision. And I think they made an out of touch and stupid decision. I think it was stupid to tell BioWare to figure out how to do a live service Dragon Age. I think that person should be ashamed of themselves. Hopefully it's not someone that I know, just in case. But like,
it was Richard.
Oh, damn it. They called him up. No, fuck it. No, he looks at a customer. No, you shut up for a second. Okay, no. Like, I think that is such I don't know, that just infuriates me that somebody at EA looks at an asset like BioWare, looks at an asset like Dragon Age and says, hey, how do you make it live service? That is absolutely infuriating. That is the dumbest thing in the entire world. And it is so, it may be Andrew Wilson. I don't know.
I'd put my money that he had a hand in.
But I'm sure it wasn't a unilateral decision.
No, probably.
I'm sure it was like but anyway, it's just so astronomically stupid to do something like that. And that started the entire thing, right? So I guess the reason I would love to know is because they deserve criticism. I don't know. You know, developers get criticized all the time. I want these executives that we never hear or that get like interviews and websites that, you know, are talking about like market rate or something like that. Those executives should be criticized as much as we criticize like developers and stuff like that. Like, I don't know who EA's CFO is right now, but I want to hold their feet over the coal and be like, hey, what the hell's going on? You know, why is this shit going down? Well, go
Stuart
ahead.
Canfield.
I thought, okay, it is a name I recognize. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm also surprised that the EA is bad guy narrative is actually seemingly somewhat straightforward.
They all look so smug.
Oh, EA executive. The EA is bad guy narrative is like so straightforward because it's like, yeah, it seems like EA did say, we want you guys to have a live service Dragon Age. And Veilguard, not all, I'm sure, the fault of a poor development cycle, but a lot of things can be traced to that poor development cycle. So how did that poor development cycle start? And it seems like it started with EA and a stupid edict to do something that shouldn't be done. And it's
not all that surprising, but it is surprising that it is pretty clean cut. It looks like it is just an EA decision that was forced down.
That's what Mike Laidlaw in the anecdote and the story.
Yeah,
that's what Mike Laidlaw said. This decision has come up from above. So it was either a high up BioWare exec or an EA exec.
Yeah,
I don't know if the story clarifies that. The thing about BioWare that I think is more foggy is why Anthem happened. That's the other thing. Because it is my understanding that Anthem was not an edict. It was we should do this because it would be a good idea because EA is really interested in live service bullshit. So we should do this because it could save us the hassle of EA telling us to do it. We could have the initiative and start it off, right? That is my understanding. It's still a bad decision. It's bad that EA put BioWare in an environment where they would have to make that sort of decision. But that's the thing that's a little more foggy. And Anthem is not in a vacuum. Anthem impacted the development of Dragon Age Veilguard, right? Because of what happened, because of the resources it sucked up, because of how it impacted company morale, et cetera, right? So you can't separate those things. But as far as like the Dragon Age 4 goes, and it's flip-flopping between single player, live service, single player, it seems like that was an EA edict, where Anthem is a little more foggy, But again, even if Anthem wasn't Andrew Wilson calling up, Casey Hudson or whoever at the time and saying, hey, make a live service, it was still that BioWare was in an ecosystem where they felt they had to do that. And to me, that's mismanagement, right? And that's maybe the story. This whole story is just how poorly EA has mismanaged BioWare. They clearly don't know what to do with the company. They clearly don't know, how to do anything except make sports games. Electronic Arts, it seems like the thing that Electronic Arts is best at is loot boxes. That's basically it. Yeah. Ultimate Team, which is just a vehicle for loot boxes. And that's really frustrating. Battlefield has sputtered. Titanfall, Apex Legends, I guess, is successful, but Apex Legends, I don't think was innovative. Titanfall was, but we're not going to get a Titanfall 3 anytime soon. Respawn has been at the Jedi games have been nice, but I think EA isn't interested in that. They're interested in things that make FIFA Ultimate Team money. Yeah. But unfortunately, sports do that, and Call of Duty does that, and that's basically it. Other than free to play, Genshin Impact and shit like that. Single player RPGs and stuff like that are never going to make that much money, but that's just the nature of the business. You need to get over it and scale for that, not try and make every round peg fit into a square hole. A lot of the story does explain the tonal shifts in Veilguard, because there's no denying Veilguard's writing was all over the place, and I remember talking about it. I don't know if you remember saying it. This isn't me patting myself on the back, but I remember talking about this just feels like a game that was just chewed up during development. Yeah. Because some of the different, tonal shifts, sudden out of left fields with some characters, some of the weird, awkward dialogue, it just felt like a game where there was a multiple shit tons of rewrites. Lines were just left the way they were because you didn't have time to do anything. But at the same time, Veilguard isn't horrible. I wouldn't say it's bad. There are parts of it that are bad, but I really enjoyed certain parts of it. I think a lot of the characters are interesting. A lot of the characters grow. Characters have interesting side stories. I think some of the gameplay is pretty cool. I think some of the sites are pretty cool. So it's if someone were to ask me, is it worth playing? I'd say, yeah, 100%, especially if you like Dragon Age. It's not, to me, I don't know. It's not so bad that I feel like I couldn't go back to it ever again, or that I don't want to think about it, or there's nothing interesting about it. It's not like Rise of Skywalker, where it's just so dumb that it's there's nothing here. There's no substance. There's no, there's nothing that that redeems it in any way. It's just bad. That's sort of how I feel with Rise of Skywalker. Where Veilguard, it's no, there's interesting tidbits there. There's real ambition. You brought back your original Inquisitor. How awesome is that? Now, you had to remake them, so hopefully you knew you had a canon Inquisitor. But I remade my Inquisitor, and to see my Inquisitor come back with the same actor, it was just, that was fucking cool, right? And be this character that I no longer control, right? I don't know how many video games have done that, but imagine you spend so much time in an RPG with a character, that character reappears, maybe Hawk, because I think he's in Inquisition. Yeah. So maybe him, but even then, it's not you get, or her, but you don't get to customize them, Yeah. So it's your Inquisitor, you create. So to see them again outside of your control, I think that's fascinating. That's really cool. And Veilguard did that. So it's ambitious. But anyway, now I'm just talking about Dragon Age Veilguard. And sorry, the reason I got into that tangent is just when you learn about all the stuff that Veilguard went through, the things that Veilguard gets right, it's impressive that it wasn't a complete dumpster fire and instead was a dumpster fire some of the time. In other parts, it showed real ambition and had some real things to say. And I think that's cool. Did you have anything else about the story? No. So I do have a thought about the next Mass Effect, because there's clearly pressure on the next Mass Effect. But I don't think it matters what happens with the next Mass Effect. I think this is an inevitability that EA is looking for a way out here with BioWare. And when I say that, I mean not literally. It's not like they're literally searching for a way. I don't see, I feel like if you read the tea leaves, I don't see how 10 years from now BioWare is working on the next game, like its next game or whatever, right? I feel like whether or not, if the next Mass Effect is really successful, and I hope it is, and I hope it's really good. It's again, because it's not Madden, it's not going to make Madden numbers. So why does EA care? So why would they keep the studio around? Because it's just going to be another game that's going to be expensive, that they're going to have to hire a bunch of people, bring on, it's going to get a big budget. It's not going to make the kind of numbers that they want from their titles, right? So why keep BioWare going, you know? And at that point, what would they do with BioWare besides shutting it down? So I hate making that kind of prediction, but I just feel like in this day and age when, Tango gets shut down, but even though an hour before it gets shut down, it releases a game that gets critically acclaimed and all that stuff. In that sort of world with layoffs and everything, I just don't see why EA would tolerate BioWare. And in that instance, I think they should just, I don't know if this is a possibility. Legally, financially, I have no idea. But just sell BioWare. Sell it to somebody. I don't know who. Could Larian buy them? Would that work? I don't know. I don't even know how that would work. But could Larian buy a studio and give them autonomy? Maybe. And then like every 2 years, they alternate. BioWare RPG, Larian RPG, BioWare RPG. That's our way to Praxis. That's our way to Nirvana. Just Larian and BioWare alternating RPGs. PlayStation.
So they finally merge into one.
Yeah, Larryware. And they make the greatest RPG of all time. Which Larian's already making BioWare RPGs practically. But what about PlayStation? Could you sell them to PlayStation? PlayStation could use another developer. PlayStation's not a great company, but like no company is good. But like as far as a studio that seems to manage its first party studios like relatively well, I think maybe PlayStation could do it. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but the reason I'm doing this is just because I feel like there's no reason for BioWare to be in this state except for EA completely screwing the pooch, because their priority is just, we don't give a shit, make us Madden numbers. And that's infuriating. So whatever happens in the future, I think this just can't be good for BioWare. There's going to be lots of pressure on the next Mass Effect. And unfortunately, no matter how successful the next Mass Effect is, I feel like this is an existential problem where EA wants something, BioWare cannot provide that, and so we're left at an impasse. I don't know. Before we move on to our last story, I did want to read how the Schreier's piece ends here. So again, I'm just reading from Schreier's story. Doug Kreutz, it might be Kreitz, I'm not sure. I'm gonna say Kreutz. This is talking about Doug Kreutz. Trying to fix its fantasy-focused studio may be easier than starting something new. That said, if they shutter the doors tomorrow, I wouldn't be totally surprised, Kreutz added. It has been over a decade since they produced a hit. Kreutz is an analyst with TD Cowen. Yeah, TD Cowen. So I just wanted to mention this because I think how the story ended kind of bothered me a little bit. Because, yes, BioWare has not produced a hit since Inquisition, but why is that? Is it just because they suddenly suck at making video games? Or is it because everything we've been talking about has to do with EA and mismanaging the studio? And if you have EA mismanaging your studio, doesn't that make it exponentially harder to create a hit video game? And what are the expectations for your hit video game? What kind of numbers do you want your video games to make? Are those expectations reasonable? Are they understandable? Or are they bullshit, right? So I don't know. This bothers me because it feels like, and also Jason Schreier knows this. So I don't see why we have to keep asking analysts what their opinion is. No disrespect to Doug, but I don't give a shit what his takes are on video games. This is like if Brian Windhorst for ESPN was writing a piece about the NBA Finals, and then at the end, he has to interview Stephen A. Smith so Stephen A. Smith can explain why scoring more points is better in the playoffs or something like that. I'm sure Brian Windhorst and readers understand that concept. The reason that this guy is in here, and this is my guess, I love Jason Schreier. Call me out if you happen to be listening. But the reason it's in there is because there's probably an editor who doesn't understand video games and thinks, well, you need an expert. You need someone to speak to the shareholders. You need someone to speak to our audience, which is a bunch of assholes who are spreading their investments around. So interview this Doug guy from TD Cohen and get him to say a fucking obvious thing and use that quote to end the story, right? Instead of ending the story on a more human quote from David Gator or Mark Dara or Mike Laidlaw or somebody who worked on these games and loved them, right? Like, so I don't think this is nitpicky, because I think it's important about how we cover games and who we interview and the kind of things that we make relevant. But it's like, yeah, you are correct that they haven't hit, that it's a problem that BioWare hasn't made a hit game since Dragon Age Inquisition. It's also a problem that I haven't hit a home run in a Major League Baseball stadium. But of course, the context around that is that I'm not a baseball player, and that's impossible for me to do. And the context around BioWare not making a hit game is that they struggled on Andromeda. What the fuck happened with Anthem? Who knows? Why were they making a live service shooter in the first place? And then who made the decision that Veilguard needed to be a live service game when that is clearly a bad decision to make? And it wasn't BioWare's decision. So yeah, they haven't had a hit game, but it doesn't seem like the environment that they've worked in has been one where they could make a hit game. So before we say, who knows, okay, you know what I'm saying? Stop interviewing these jack to the tits like fucking Wall Street traders. I don't care what their takes are, all right? Unless Doug can name every character in fucking Final Fantasy VII, I don't want to hear his video game takes, okay? I think that's reasonable.
Watch Doug be some like video game legend, like has like several high scores that have never been beaten.
Yeah, I will admit I have not looked him up, so maybe he's worked in games before. I don't know. The larger point is that I just don't like how the story ended, and I feel like there's an editor somewhere who's like, we need an expert opinion, but it's like, no, you got Brian Windhorst writing the story about the NBA. You don't need to interview another person that is saying something Brian Windhorst and readers know. Anyway, okay, sorry. All right, moving on. So there's an update on the Ubisoft culture. I'm not even sure what to call it. Ongoing litigation, I guess. This was reported on June 5th by The Guardian's Angelique Chrysafis. I didn't see it until Games Industry reported on it last week. A quick reminder, 5 former Ubisoft executives were arrested by French police after a year-long investigation into sexual harassment and assault at Ubisoft. The trial this month for Sergei never learned how to pronounce his name, but don't really care. The trial for Hasko. The trial for Sergei Hasko, who is former CCO and second in command behind Yves, Tommy Francois, who was VP editor and creative services, and Guillaume Patreau, I think, former game director. Those 3 are on trial this month. There are a lot of details. I'm just going to read a summary from the story, and I think, again, we'll link to the original Guardian article in the description. Quote, in 4 days of hearings, female former staff members variously described being tied to a chair, forced to do handstands, subjected to constant comments about sex in their bodies, having to endure sexist and homophobic jokes, drawing of penises being stuck to computers, a manager who farted in workers' faces or scribbled on women with marker pens, gave unsolicited shoulder massages, played pornographic films in an open plan office, and another executive who cracked a whip near people's heads. The 3 men deny all charges. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about this, except that Yves Guillemot should be fine. Yves Guillemot should not be the CEO of Ubisoft. I find it incredibly hard to believe. Again, it goes back to what that investor asked. You either knew and did nothing, in which case, what are you doing? You didn't know, in which case, what are you doing? Or you knew some of it and did nothing, in which case, what are you doing? So there isn't a good outcome here, no matter what your answer is. And as Yves Guillemot's first response was, I'm a victim too. Somebody betrayed my trust. And that made me angry. Because if anything, he should be bowing at the feet of his workers, begging for apologies. Because yeah, even if you didn't know and your trust was betrayed, if you're the buck's got to fucking stop somewhere. And I know we're in this time and place in American politics where it's never the president's fault. It's never a senator's fault. We always got to shove it down to, I don't know, it's an immigrant or it's some other fucking person that you've never heard of. It's never, it's this institution is corrupt. It's like there's never anyone empowered. They're not held responsible for anything. But I disagree with that way of thinking about the world. And I feel like if you're a CEO of a company like this and your right-hand man is doing stuff so bad that he gets fucking arrested, I don't know, man. It's hard to see. It's hard to understand that you shouldn't have any blame there. I think Ubisoft honestly would rather just this disappear, and they don't care.
Yeah.
They got money from Tencent. They're off and running. Assassin's Creed Shadows did well for them. So I think they'd rather bury this in the past, move forward, say that they've made culture improvements, which maybe they have, and just barrel forward, hopefully without having to look at the past anymore. Do you have any reaction to any of this? I'm sorry.
They're trudging forward with the we're sorry BP, maneuver.
Yeah. And I want to make clear, I am glad that Assassin's Creed Shadows did well, because again, people make games, right?
Yeah.
So it's like some artist or designer or creative director, like they don't deserve to have their careers ruined because people couldn't manage the culture at their studio, 5 years ago. But when it comes to Yves Guillemot,
but maybe the CEO should, take some responsibility for what happened under his management.
Yes. Thank you for quieting my brain and holding it still while it vibrates and bounces off my fucking skull everywhere. Okay. Is there anything else you wanna say here? About anything? We're at the end of the show. We don't have Richard, so we can't do tidbits.
John Fisher stepped down, sell the eggs, give it to someone who actually cares.
That's random, but because you're in MLB, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Follow us.
And CEOs and
sure, yeah. Somebody with power take responsibility, right? Listen to Uncle Ben. Maybe can we do that for once? Stop passing the buck everywhere. YouTube.com/gaming discourse, Patreon.com/the gaming discourse. 247 $10. We'll see you next week. Bye.